Mayong adlaw, I'm Ryan Macasero, and you're watching Voices from the Regions. Cebu is the most vote-rich province in the Philippines with 3.2 million votes. But how well the national candidates are able to get these votes depends on how are they able to maintain their relationships with the local dynasties and political parties. So to help me make sense of the elections and the political scene here in Cebu are two journalists who have been covering the campaigns. First, we have John Sitchon, who covers Metro Cebu for Rappler. He's the correspondent here. And Delta Letigio, a multimedia reporter for CBN Digital. Thank you both for joining us. And I wanted this to be a free-flowing conversation because this is the last episode of Voices from the Regions before Election Day on May 9. So just very informal. Let's talk about what we've been through since the beginning of the campaign season, which began last February. It's been a very interesting time for Cebu and for the entire country. So let's start off by talking about, for you guys, let's start with Delta perhaps. What's been the highlight of this campaign season so far for you?
Um, the highlight of this campaign season for me as a local reporter would be the presidential election. So this is my first election. This is my second elections, and I have covered the local midterm elections in 2019, and it was a very different political landscape compared to now. Um, the presidential election really um, upped the what do you call this, the tricks, the strategies of the political parties, not only in Cebu, but also the national parties coming here. And it took a lot of time for the local parties to choose sides, to choose a national candidate.
Mhm.
There had been a lot of rumors going about, but basically it was that there are a lot of, it was in a much of a bigger sense. The election was bigger. It was a lot of variables going around during these elections. That's,
Mhm. I know you cover Cebu City Hall for the most part, and for right now, the mayor is Mike Rama, who is currently supporting the frontrunner in the surveys, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. Could you talk a little bit about how that alliance came about? I know Rama was initially supporting Bongo before he dropped out of the race later on. So how did that come about?
well, Mayor Rama is very loyal to the PDP Laban Husky faction. So he is a supporter of President Rodrigo Duterte. So for a while, he waited for the announcement of President Rodrigo Duterte on who the president would be supporting for the presidential race. However, it took a lot of time. Bongo ran for president, and so it it was expected that PDP Laban and Kusi faction will be supporting Bongo. So Vice Mayor Michael Rama, as a loyal supporter, also supported Bongo. But when he pulled out, there was this vacuum, and since President Duterte did not announce his support to any other presidential candidate, Rama was perhaps placed in a position where he would have to decide for the party, for his own local party. And he chose Bongbong Marcos because they have a similar experience in the 2016 elections. Bongbong Marcos, as we know, asked for a recount of the votes because he believed that he was cheated of the votes. But as you all know, the results of the recount favored incumbent Vice President Lenny Robredo. Rama as well in 2016 believed that he was cheated out of the mayoral race in Cebu City. He was running against um, back then incumbent Mayor Tomas Esmeña, and he really believed that he should have won because his entire slate, his vice mayor back then was the late Edgar Labella, and his entire councilorial slate won. So at that time, he really thought that he should have won during the election. So that was what primarily the thing that bonds them together. Aside from being really close friends, for decades now, uh, Rama has been close friends with the Marcos family. But it's that incident 2016 that tied them together and
Mhm,
made Rama announce his support to Bongbong Marcos.
mhm, mhm. I just wanted to go to John for a second. It's your actually first election that you've covered, local or national. So, for you, what's been the most interesting thing that you've experienced or that you've observed so far?
To be honest, Ryan, when I'm on the field, I'm seeing um, a lot of organic movement coming from the people themselves. Uh, we're seeing these in the form of house to house campaigns. I think this was pointed out even in a Rappler talk between Rappler editor Martes Vitog and Senator Franklin Durelon that there have been house to house campaigns before, but these normally would be conducted in the local arena. Now we're seeing house to house campaigns that are being organized by our national candidates. And it even stretches to different people from different walks of life. So, right now, we're beginning to see really, really young people who normally you wouldn't be seeing going out of their homes, going from barangay to barangay, trying to convince older people even to vote for their candidate. And it's kind of a first time thing, I've been told, but seeing it up front and up close, we can say that this is a particular movement that's very inherent coming from our generation, um, and it has its roots from social media engagements. A lot of people see it up close on their phones, and they see the back and forth between different candidates.
Mm.
They see information being spread left and right, so it's easier for people to just organize and to just appear in different barangays and places whenever they want to go out and vouch for their candidates.
Both of you have been covering local government. So, what are for the Cebuano voters? What are the most important issues to them, Delta?
Based on my experience in talking with the voters, being in the different political rallies, both local and national parties, I've noticed that Cebuanos really want leaders who know the problems of Cebu and who can address them. Medyo regionalistic jud ang Cebu when it comes to choosing their leaders. They want leaders na who can help Cebu aside from being simply national leaders who are quite far leading them from Manila. Kinahanglan kasabot sa gid sila kung unsa pud ang problema sa Cebu ug unsa pud ang ilahang matabang. So that is what I really see among Cebuanos. They want to choose a leader who knows Cebu and loves Cebu for what it is.
So more of kanang dapat familiar sila sa mga local problems such I think 'di ba like recently we had Typhoon Odette. What else specifically like are the issues that really like hit the gut for residents here in Cebu?
Aside from Typhoon Odette, which was very recent, so everyone was talking about it in all campaigns. People are saying, the candidates are boasting kung sa ilahang nabuhat pag Odette. It's not. It's also about transportation. That's a huge problem here in Cebu, considering the fact that the bus rapid transit has not yet been fully implemented. It's even just starting wala pa gid siya basically wala pa jud makita as of now aside sa kaning mga sea buses.
Mhm.
And then we also have infrastructure. So proud kayo ang Cebu for their CCLEX, which is a PPP project. So it's a very Cebuano project and they're very proud of it. But the question is now, how will the national government, address the other infrastructure problems of of Cebu and Metro Cebu uh, as uh, as a whole? Because the ang problema sa Cebu nga urban areas stretch out man siya sa entire Metro Cebu, and as well as how to bring in more developments outside the Metro City, because Cebuanos are very independent when it comes to its economy. Like we have noticed man nga, Governor Gwendolyn Garcia will not hesitate to close off borders for hogs because of ESF, for to poultry because of bird flu, because Cebu can actually sustain itself economically. Ang gusto rin sa mga Bisaya is that musulod pa jud ang investors, ang tourists in order for them to grow town by town, city by city.
Mm-mm. John, you cover Lapu-Lapu and Mandawi as well. Are the issues similar for people here, or are there specific things also that people want the government to pay attention to?
For residents living in Lapu-Lapu, those who live especially in the islands of Olango, they're more particular on like getting back rebuilding from Odette, because these areas were ground zero when Odette happened. And well, there are some similarities in certain parts in Cebu City and in Mandawi City, and just taking a look at them, they've recovered from Odette. But there are far-flung areas, mountainous barangays that are still looking to the provincial government, to their city governments, to provide them with relief, to provide them with resources in order to rebuild. So while I agree with Delta on economics, like trying to get back into the industry, I feel like for the most part, those living in marginalized areas, especially those in mountainous barangays, what's more important to them is being able to eat in a day. So particularly those issues on whether or not they have enough resources to provide for their family and to ensure that their kids also go to the public schools. That's a bigger priority for them. And we've seen how even they're young are asking for working opportunities, because they do enter metros, or they go down coming from the mountainous barangays to look for jobs and also look for opportunities. And more often than not, these are the same set and groups that are being exploited during elections. So we have to look out for those areas, specifically those that are hit most by Typhoon and then. And if I can recall, recently we actually did an article specifically on damaged lamppost areas that have yet to be fixed after Odette left. So those are the bigger issues for people who belong to those sectors in Mandawi City and in Lapu-Lapu City, especially in Olango Island.
Mm. For those who aren't familiar with how Cebu is set up, so we have three independent cities: Cebu City, Mandawi City, and Lapu-Lapu City. Cebu City and Lapu-Lapu can't vote for governor, but Mandawi can. And I wanted to go back to the highlights for this campaign period. For me, it was the endorsement of one Cebu's endorsement of Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. When because the family actually held off for on an endorsement for the longest time because of disagreements between Gwen Garcia's brother PJ Garcia and the govern and Cristina Garcia Frasco, who is the spokesperson of Sara Duterte Frasco. For me, I think it was surprising um, because Gwen Garcia could win Cebu with or without endorsing Bongbong Marcos, and I was expecting her to prioritize family. Staying on good terms with the family, knowing that Congressman PJ Garcia was very anti-Marcos, but they decided to go ahead, and he wasn't at the press conference. I believe that they. Delta, what were your thoughts that day when you heard the announcement?
Um, of course, it was a very strong statement for the entire one Cebu to say we are supporting BBM, we are supporting BBM and Sarah. And on paper, or perhaps when you first hear it, it's going to come up as a real shock, and then you're going to expect that, oh, okay, Cebu is a BBM territory now. But the thing is, just the day after, just a few weeks after, you see you see the true colors of the local candidates and how somehow one Cebu isn't exactly one. For one thing,
Mm.
third district under Congressman PJ Garcia is still supporting Isko. Moreno is still strongly for Isko. Um, but they're still with one Cebu, they're still going to be supporting Gwen Garcia, and then slowly, I think San Remigio, and then Dumanhog also um, declared their support for Lenny Robredo. So, as as
And
much
Dumanhog is
as
the
I
hometown
know,
of the Garcias, di ba?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
which is very unique because you can really see now that as much as they want to show a one united Cebu, Cebuanos always have their own mind. Their
Mm.
leaders, their individual leaders, have their own mind. PJ Garcia is the brother of Gwen Garcia, and you'd expect him to perhaps go with the family's decision, but he did not. And in our recent interview with him during the grand rally of Isko Moreno here, I think that was 2 days ago, he said that he could not leave Isko because he believed that Isko was the best for the country. And the same thing, the man who Mayor Gungun Gika, he also said the same thing for Lenny Robredo. And I think that this is something unique in this circumstance that they're showing local unity but they're also showing national defiance with their party. And personally, I believe that it is good that Cebuanos have a choice. You know that their leaders are not just following one single leader, because it also allows Cebuanos to have a choice. But it affects the political scene here differently, because you're now wondering what will happen next, and
Mm.
it's getting closer to the election, and any minute, any hour, something might change. So that's how I see it. It's quite a unique experience covering this little buak-buak sa ilahang party.
Yeah, I like what you said. How on a local level, the party is one, but on the national, when it comes to supporting national candidates, they're very not necessarily united. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, how it plays out once the results start to come in. If this endorsement of one Cebu is actually going to be a big factor, or I think there are a lot of nuances. I think that's what is unique about our position here, as local reporters, know that we get to connect the dots from the sitios to the barangays, up to the city, to the province, and even out to the national. So I think it's very unique perspective. So which what brings me to my next topic I wanted to discuss is I think the whole country is wondering who is going to win Cebu. The two front runners right now are, of course, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Vice President Lenny Robredo, who won Cebu in 2016. But as we all know, it's a very different context now. She doesn't have very many local chief executive supports, but she had a big rally in Mandawi City the other week. I guess crowd estimates were at somewhere about 150,000, but so did um, the Unity in Tandem in Cebu City, which was supported by, of course, One Cebu and um, Partido Barug of Mike Rama. So, from your guys' perspective, do you see a majority, or is it really divided and you can't tell, or how does it feel from where you sit here in Cebu? And
Is that
whoever
for me?
wants to go, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I don't want to say exactly that Lenny or BBM is going to win, categorically because it's a tight race. I'm going to like burn myself a mistake if I'm going to say one name over the other. But it's definitely going to be either one of them. I see that as much as we don't want to say that the survey is going to predict the election or it's just the survey that's going to predict the elections, we also know and understand that they also hold merit. And based on the events here in Cebu and the political movement in Cebu, I can say that they are the two candidates that would most likely win here in Cebu. I don't know which of them is going to win. It's going to be very hard for the Robredo camp considering that One Cebu has endorsed BBM. But then um, the people's movement for Robredo is also very strong in Cebu. Most of her events, her campaigns, her sorties are actually organized by the people themselves. And I don't want to disregard that people's movement just because the leaders or the political leaders have had their say. Cebuanos have their own mind, even if their leaders are saying, "Okay, let's vote for Isko, let's vote for BBM, let's vote for anyone." But if the people are moving down from the grassroots, it's going to affect the elections. But we also cannot, we cannot dispel the power of one Cebu as a huge part. Like it's huge. It's going to affect even the barangays of each town. People are going to be divided over which president are they going to choose. Is it Lenny or is it PPM? That is my personal and professional say. I
Mhm.
think they're going to win. Either one of them are going to win here. I do not see a win for the other candidates, unfortunately. But we may never know. We may never know. Maybe PJ Garcia can deliver for ISCO. Perhaps we will see a surprise after all.
Mhm. So, but by the other candidates, I think we mean Isko Moreno, Mayor Isko Moreno, Senator Ping Lacson, and boxer Senator Manny Pacquiao. And to put a little context there, they say that Cebu's role in the national elections is important because since 2004 at least, whoever wins in Cebu also becomes president. So in 2004, it was Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. In 2010, it was the late President Noynoy Aquino, and in 2016, it was Rodrigo Duterte who won by a huge margin with I think over 1 million or 1.1 million votes. So, John, from your observation as someone covering an election for the first time and having to cover one of the most historic elections in recent history, what does it look like for you from where you cover?
Well, taking a look at how so much of the voting population in Cebu, uh, primarily coming from young voters, um, it's easy to it's you're kind of attracted to the idea that young voters would choose more progressive candidates, um, and the one being positioned as a progressive right now, or the ideal candidate, would be Lenny Robredo. In fact, it's come to a point where so many of the volunteers have decided to create their own groups that follow after Lawyers for Lenny. They've actually come to a point where they now have graphic designers for Lenny, singles for Lenny, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of you. I agree with Delta that you really can't say, because taking a look at it, even if I had to say that a large majority of the voters coming from Cebu are young voters, there are areas in the province that are really detached from what's in Metro Cebu, and just to point out that there's really a huge gap in information and information literacy at that. So it's a lot harder for people who belong to far-flung areas to even grasp like those kinds of ideals, and or at least information that wouldn't like affect the way that they vote. So like taking a look at it from my first time perspective, um, I'd say that the young people are a lot more engaged, and it's a very young people versus old people kind of voting kind of game. So I'd like to see it that way.
So you're
um
latching your hope on to the youth population in Cebu to
yes.
drive. Okay, that's an interesting take. Um, I wanted to move on to another topic because we're here in Cebu, which is a very metropolitan area and has one of the strongest, I think, media environments outside of Metro Manila. So John and I are from uh, a national media outfit who set up in Cebu around 2019. So we're, Rappler Cebu Bureau. But Delta is from a homegrown media outlet, Cebu Daily News, which used to have a print, and I think its last print edition was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and now it's fully online digital. Can you talk a little bit about the candidates' relationship, at least the candidates you cover with the media? What is it like? Is it easy to get information? Is it easy to get interviews, or are there hostilities? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm,
Firstly,
For CDN,
Uh,
we had
yeah.
we had a long relationship with the political scene here in Cebu, so it's already expected that we have um, a wide range of sources already. Like when I started in CDN Print, I inherited these sources from my predecessing um, reporters and editors. So I have this entire uh, book, booklet siya. Nanatanan. So, sa'yo na lang siya. It's so easy for us to reach out. The problem is with that, there is also histories with each party, with each politician, which means that if at some point in our history, in our 24 years of history, that politician, perhaps was in a headline, in a bad headline, and like we call it nainitan because of our articles, that politician is going to have quite a hostile relationship with the current reporters, even if it wasn't our fault. Even if we didn't write that stories years back, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we didn't write it. They're going to have a hostile relationship with us. And it takes a lot of time to create a new relationship with these sources. But then I think because it's more of a local scene, it's much easier to meet them. I mean, these are people that you might um, meet somewhere when you're traveling. Your counselors, you're going to meet them when you're perhaps going to a mall, or even your mayor, you're going to meet if you go to a hotel, and then you might meet your mayor there. So it's a very local, it's quite cozy. So we get to have a good working relationship in a way that it doesn't really impede our journalistic duties. We can always get their side. But there are times when it's hostile. It's not as hostile as before. This election is quite peaceful, but there are still difficulties, especially those candidates who are very controversial and they know that when the media is after them, it is going to be bad news. So yeah, it's not as difficult in 20 as compared to 2019. It's much more paced and peaceful relatively these elections. That's what I noticed.
Mhm. John, how about you? You're just starting to build relationships with these politicians and making sources. So, what's your experience been like being a newbie reporter for Rappler but straight to the local scene here in Cebu?
well, for starters, I didn't just like start as a reporter for one of the locals. I actually started as a reporter with Rappler, especially, and that's a significant factor that I want to be able to emphasize, primarily because while there's some hostility, maybe hostility isn't the word, but maybe hesitation. There is to some extent a degree like there's hesitation when um, when I'm trying to talk to a source. There are certain behaviors that I would notice that isn't present when there are press cons and I'm just blending in with fellow reporters coming from local news outlets. So there are times where uh, I do often I don't necessarily want to point out that I feel singled out by it, but I acknowledge that there is to some extent, our in Rappler's history of investigative journalism, we tend to be a lot more critical, and my writing, I do tend to be a lot more critical, and I think that's kind of the environment that I've grown into. But in terms of being a first time reporter in this kind of environment, um, I think it's a lot of catching up because I've only had 2 years to prepare prior to this, and for any new reporter, um, it takes a lot more than 2 years to suddenly catch up with all of the political alliances, the dynasties that are present in different parts of Cebu, not just in Metro Cebu, but also in the different municipalities and towns. So it took a lot of catching up. It also took a lot of um, like investigations and dissecting families and trying to nuance them from one another in order for me to produce at least um, well quality content. So yeah, those were one of the main challenges I had as a reporter. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's the job of the journalist to be able to vet, produce, and also fact check anything that these politicians say. So I'm just glad to be able to be part of that democratic process.
Right. For I guess just to wrap this up since we're running out of time, Delta, I want to give you a chance to talk to your readers at CD and Digital who've been following your stories. What do you have to say to your readers in the last 3 days before election day? So a lot of them are also voters. So if you could talk to them right now, what would you say?
Mm. First of all, I am very much lucky, like perhaps or blessed that as much as I'm covering Cebu City, I'm also a resident. So I know the problems of Cebu City residents firsthand. I am affected by the decisions of the people who are leading the city. And for the last 4 years, I have also realized the extent of my power as a journalist in influencing these politicians to help and to do better in their jobs. Um, I'm very thankful because CDN Digital has been the forefront of digital media here in Cebu. We are currently number one, so thank you so much. And we are growing in the social media. We are growing on Facebook. We continue to grow. Our TikTok has had a massive rise in the past months since it was established. YouTube is also growing. Our Twitter is continuously growing. Instagram is continuously growing. It shows us the trust and confidence of the Cebuanos in our stories, and it pushes us and drives us to write more. And I understand that there are many news articles that can be controversial and can come off as very, very critical. But that is our job, and we need to have those stories, even if it hurts, because that propels the government to do something. And our relationship with our readers is like, what do you call this, love hate. There are many stories that get good reviews, the others are basically a war zone for comments. It's different when it's a digital media, but we really see the commitment of our readers. And many of our stories actually come from the readers because we read the comments, we read the messages, and when we see something that needs to be pushed, we actually write it and we actually um, go to our sources and we actually try and help because that's our mantra, that's our goal, journalism that builds communities. And it's been difficult this elections. It's been quite a challenge with only a few reporters on the field, but through the support of our readers and our subscribers, we really push through. And we hope that you will continue to subscribe to us in the next few days because we will have a really todo na election coverage. We give you all the information that you will need for next week. That's it.
And it's not every day that we have a crossover like this where we guest um, other
Yeah.
reporters from media outlets. So this is actually a show of media solidarity at this time, and I think it's really needed, no, in times like
Yes.
this. So,
Mm-mm.
John, how about same for you? How what would you say to you know our readers? We're a new presence in Cebu, so people are just starting to get used to us and the way that we do our own story. So how would you talk to our audience right now, given that we only have 3 days before we elect new leaders?
Well, definitely, if we still have enough time to be able to convince people that there are ideal candidates, that there are candidates capable of definitely leading us away from corruption and so on and so forth. And the best way to do that is to vet them and to really dig deep into their trails and try to find out if they're actually capable of what they say they're whatever they're promising. And given that we are like covering the entire like the entire elections and the political dynasties and campaigns that are present in Cebu, we recommend that you take the time to be able to read and figure out the type of politicians, the type of leaders that you might be voting for this coming May 9. So we have readily available resources. We recommend that you read those resources, you share them with your friends, but more importantly, when you see and you know and you've got the conviction to say that there are ideal candidates, it's best that you go out there, share it with your family, share it with your relatives, and ensure that Cebu sees at least better futures. You know, um, it's my first time voting, and it scares me. It scares me a lot that somehow we might be between going below the basket, or at least going through possibly one of the worst years of our lives, and it's going to be decided in just one. And it's going to be decided in one day, and I it scares us a lot for sure. But we just have to vote and hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess for me, I just want to, tell the readers who are probably also voters that to vote based on truth. There is, uh, there's a lot of information and disinformation online, and vote based on what aligns with your values and your principles. And I also want to thank the our audience here in Cebu who has been very engaged and giving us a lot of feedback, which has helped us really tailor our coverage with our readers in mind, because our main role here is to be proxies for the people and to put on the agenda the most important issues that matter to them. So I think we lost Delta, but oh, she's back. Oh,
I'm
Delta,
back.
thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience with us. It's been a very valuable discussion, and I hope that our listeners also took away things with how the political and election scene looks from where we sit as reporters in the field. Thank you, John, also for joining us. And to Delta, you can follow Delta Stories on CDN Digital. And our coverage you can follow by following the hashtags PHVote, hashtag We Decide, and on Rappler.com. Again, this is Voices from the Region. I'm Ryan Macasero. Thank you for watching.